Congressman Darrell Issa is here to talk about a hot topic these days, and that is retirement. The baby boomer generation is getting closer to that age, and we're going to be losing a lot of experienced employees. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Dave. It is an important issue. We're starting with the federal workforce and trying to change the federal workforce retirement, which today actually encourages federal workers, once they're vested, let's say 25 years, to leave and go get a second career, because they really are only getting sort of half pay to stay on. This is obviously to our detriment. We want a federal worker to be encouraged to stay on as long as possible, even past 65 if they're still productive. But the same is true for all of us that are going to be retiring. You know, when we look at General Motors, and I'm switching them for a second, and their problem, they're all talking about their legacy cost. That's the cost of their retirees. Social Security is not vested. If we don't begin changing our legacy cost now, the deficits that are running under the Obama administration will be nothing compared to what we're going to be running when the three of us retire. So our real challenge is begin making the changes now, begin taking some of those billion or even $trillion expenses, or wait until it's much worse. And number one is going to be encouraging people to work longer, make it worth their while, make the workplace environment right. And I know this is a time of unemployment, but we need to look forward and say, when we get back to full employment, will it be encouraging people to work or to live on retirement that right now we can't afford?
How difficult will this change? I mean, you're really kind of proposing an institutional change. How difficult will that be to make, and how long would it take to turn that around?
Well, in the case of where we're starting with federal workers, it's actually pretty straightforward, because we have a bad system for federal workers. We basically give you as much retirement benefit as we can in the early years, and then we say if you stay on with your higher pay, your last three, you'll make more. But that's the only incentive, because otherwise the accrual in this defined benefits plan or classic pension plan is actually sitting there not growing nearly as much as it would if you went and started another one with a private company. And so part of what we're trying to do is move people from the existing plan to, at least when they're normally retiring, to maybe what you might call a super 401k. If we do that, what we can do is say, look, you've locked in your 20 or 25 years. Now we're going to make it worth your while, because you're going to see your 401 accumulating. We call it TSP, Thrift Savings Plan for federal workers. Accumulate much quicker, which means you've got a reason to stay, to continue working. Where right now, if you look at our military people, after 20 years, they've got 50% pay if they retire. They always talk in the terms of half pay for staying. We don't want to encourage people to leave when they're 42 years old. We want to keep them through a full retirement. It's less expensive for us, and it can be better for the worker.
And I was going to ask that. It's not to mention that these workers that we're losing are the most experienced, best workers we have.
Absolutely. We have something called an annuitant in government, and every time we need somebody, such as for this bailout that we're overseeing, what we do is we change the rules temporarily just for the workers we bring in as annuitant. And we say, well, these retirees, we're going to give them a special deal. After 9/11, we did the same thing for CIA, but we keep doing it piecemeal. My plan as the lead Republican on the committee that oversees the federal workforce is, let's get it right for the federal workers. Let's make these changes, but let's make them based on the idea that Americans are going, whether they're federal workers or civilians, are going to want to have a similar situation. We need to do a plan for America that keeps us from looking like General Motors 10 years from now, when retirees begin being greater in number at the ocean's edge, if you will. So that's a tradition that actually works pretty well in government. President Obama made probably one mistake, which was he keeps talking to a domestic audience when he says change from the last 7 years. It's fair to say there's a change and he needs to lead it. It's not necessarily fair to say that somehow it was just the last 8 years. Having said that, his trip to Turkey was very important. This was an outreach to the Islamic world by somebody who grew up in the Islamic world. He's not Muslim, but he does have a real base. And so that was a great message. The rest of what probably went on did not go on anything that you or I saw. It's the private meetings, one-on-one, with heads of state that develop relationships that can be used from one president to another or to a prime minister. And I'm assuming, because I've met President Obama, he is in fact good in a one-on-one. He probably did quite well.
Before we let you go, what do you think about this headline on the New York Times? And also, Jane King on Wall Street alluded to it. A poll is finding that more Americans are having a brighter outlook about the U.S. economy.
Well, I think Americans are naturally optimistic. We can only be forced to be pessimistic so long. So I'm very positive on that. Americans would already be more optimistic if government said, we're done putting in what we're putting in. From now on, it's private sector. We'll work with the private sector. We're not yet doing that, particularly when you watch President Obama fire the president of General Motors, and the new president doesn't look very confident that he's going to keep his job. So I think that the next step is to back out of this national situation we have, particularly back us out of, and you teed it up a little bit ago with Freddie and Fannie, we've got to second guessing how much compensation it takes to keep somebody doing a job. Privately, of course, we have to have some oversight on whether or not your tax dollars are being diverted to people's bonuses. But let's remember, in these tough times, these companies, if we're going to get us out of our money being there, we do need to attract the best and the brightest, and there's probably a rate for that. So getting that change will help public confidence a lot more. And quite frankly, as somebody who's voted against these punitive, retroactive taxes on people who got bonuses, it'll get us out of publicly talking about bonuses when the truth is we should be looking at every single individual and saying, was this compensation reasonable and necessary and predictable to keep the person, not did we keep the person, now we want our money back.
Right. Breaking the contract, as you mentioned.
Breaking the contract.
Congressman Darrell, Issa, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate having you here in the flesh instead of on the phone.
Yes.
Glad to do it anytime I'm in town.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.